Every now and again, anime viewers are faced with a supposedly vital decision. Will I watch this dubbed into English, or will I stick to the original Japanese voiceover? To the uninitiated, this might seem obvious or unimportant, but try telling that to the countless forum posts and probably the comment section underneath this video. If you were to venture into said areas of the internet looking for an answer to which is better, the English Dragon Ball Super or the Japanese Dragon Ball Super, you'd quickly realize just how defensive and elitist some members of our lovely community can be regarding the subject. So, like the wonderful YouTuber I am, it's my job to throw fuel onto the proverbial dumpster fire that is this topic. Taking into account the first 39 episodes, I think it's finally time to discuss in detail which is in fact better. This is Dragon Ball Super, English versus Japanese. Small disclaimer, I am not sponsored in any way by Funimation. Of course I have my own internal biases, and given the nature of this topic, subjectivity will play a large role. So by all means, feel free to tell me how wrong I am in the comment section down below. In order to tackle this mammoth topic, for the sake of simplicity, I've divided the video into 3 sections: comedy, action, and changes. So let's begin with our first topic. When tackling comedy, there are certain obstacles one must overcome in order to be a success in the long-running show. Cadence, character quirks are all things that need to be considered. This is made even more difficult in the case of the English dub, as they are tasked to tell the same jokes again and expect a laugh. Assuming, of course, they think English speakers who watch the Japanese dub will check in for their run of the series. And you know what? I think they did expect that. Allow me to explain why. In a situation where Funimation, when dubbing Super, could have cut corners, they have done some wonderful extra work with the dialogue comedically for the series. Every joke, if the need arises, is tweaked to suit English audiences. On top of that, dotted throughout the series are extra jokes for those on their second trip around.
Just give me a little time to put this into action, okay? Please? Can you do that? Super Saiyan, please?
I think many of you would agree that listening to a good joke is great the first time around, but hearing it again never quite captures that same feeling or response. During my initial run through the series back in 2015, there was one instance during the first 3 arcs that actually made me laugh. And no, it wasn't episode 5 or 24, it was this moment. It was completely absurd visual humor that completely caught me off guard, and I still love it to this day. However, during my second run through using the English dub, there were numerous instances I found myself laughing.
You can at least pretend!
Yeah, sure, fine, babies. Beer's here!
This is where things get a little subjective, so I'll try to explain as best I can. My theory is that physical jokes translate much more effectively than dialogue-driven ones when delivered through Japanese. I found while I understood the idea behind the delivery, the Japanese comedy landed flat much more frequently than the English did for me.
You've earned some vacation time, right? I'm a good father and husband!
I think it's clear from the work revealed that a lot of care and passion went into rewriting, recording, and producing this dub. Comedy is nuanced. But you know what isn't nuanced? Punching people in the face. It's time to move on to the next section. When one watches the Japanese dub, you are 99 times out of 100, and that's a lowballed estimate, going to watch the broadcast version. The whole point of watching the Japanese dub for many is down to wanting to see the show at the earliest possible convenience. I personally don't know many who hold off for the Japanese Blu-ray releases to catch up on the series. This can lead to viewing the show in its most raw of forms. Episodes 5, 24, and 41 are some of the most infamous. The English dub, while still retaining some of the poor animation, is utilizing the Blu-ray releases of the series, with the animation corrected to the highest quality it will ever be. So if you like pretty pictures, the English dub viewers will be getting a better first impression visually speaking. The next one is a pet peeve of mine, and so if you don't relate to this, that's fine. One thing that annoys me when watching anime is that during these bombastic animated sequences or fight scenes, if it's in Japanese, you might find that you wish your eyes weren't so fixated on the only part of the screen there isn't any action. Unless you're fluent in Japanese, I can see why someone who wants to see the action on screen might prefer the ease of viewing the English allows. Shows like Attack on Titan that are very animation and exposition heavy cause the most difficulty, and it leads me to watching the episode multiple times over to see different things. However, I understand that many are not as into the visuals as I am and want to watch purely for the story, and that's fine too. Next, I would like to look at and dissect 2 fight scenes specifically. 2 scenes that I deem as being crucial to the series as well as being great fight scenes in their own right. The first being Vegeta versus Cabba. The master-student dynamic between Vegeta and Cabba is viewed as one of the cornerstones to Vegeta's character within Super. Therefore, this scene is vitally important and requires the utmost care. Clearly, the Japanese version was loved and appreciated by fans across the world, and so you can imagine how many were waiting with bated breath as the episode unfolded before them in English. The scene is divided into 3 sections: the warm-up, the conflict, and the resolution. The warm-up consists of the initial dialogue between the two Saiyans during the early stages of the fight.
I look forward to fighting you.
This serves to further get across Cabba's sportsmanship and disconnects him from Vegeta, establishing the through line or story for this confrontation. The most noteworthy change in this scene comes during Cabba's initial flurry to Vegeta.
Hey, pace yourself now.
The Japanese version simply advises him not to get carried away. Both serve to complement the end, but in different ways. The English version paints Vegeta as the teacher much more obviously. However, on the other hand, it could be argued that the Japanese one is too disconnected from the conclusion. I would also like to note that while the dialogue remains the same, Vegeta is clearly talking to Cabba in the English version, as opposed to himself in the Japanese. Moving on from there, the conflict of the fight is introduced. Cabba announces that he cannot change into a Super Saiyan, to the surprise and disappointment of Vegeta. The conflict between the two is initially, for all intents and purposes, the same. However, as the section progresses, there is a slight difference I would like to draw attention to. During Vegeta's beatdown of Cabba, he shouts,
Given your extremely limited abilities, I'm surprised they even let you compete.
During this beatdown, I have to commend Clifford Chapin's Cabba, as his wincing added to how convincing the scene was. The way it's delivered comes across as much more harsh than the English adaptation, I think. Moving on from there, Vegeta begins to threaten Cabba and his family. This is where I think the English dub steps into a league of its own.
If you quit on me, I will kill you.
There, Sabbath's delivery of the words kill and murder sounds so sinister at this stage of the fight.
But first, I'm going to hunt down and murder, one by one, every last member of your family. For them, it won't be quick.
At this point, I'd also like to point out that Dragon Ball Super's English dub isn't as reined in as the Japanese version. This is due to their respective time slots and stations. Super airs in Japan early Saturday morning on Fuji TV for kids, and in America, Super airs on Adult Swim. They have literally added swearing to the series where there was not prior. Whether or not that's a good thing, I'll leave up to you. I feel I should also add at this time that Clifford Chapin's Cabba sounds more convincing while Super Saiyan. Remember, it's his first time transforming and he's filled with rage. The final and most important section, the resolution. There is one slight difference, which is in keeping with the trend this dub has. The final blow Vegeta deals Cabba in his Super Saiyan Blue form. In the Japanese version, he simply states, "Never forget this pain." Whereas in the English version, he says, "Remember this pain and let it activate you." The English adaptation is more on the nose, but in saying that, it's in keeping with what the dub established earlier in the fight. I appreciate Funimation's efforts in trying to make this scene their own while not compromising the narrative and through line of the confrontation. Moving on to the second, final, and quite possibly most important scene in the first 3 arcs, comes during episode 39. Hit versus Goku. There are differences in this scene, some of which seem to have bothered certain people, so let's have a look. The first thing you'll notice is that Schimmel's Goku's voice changes slightly depending on the form he is in, so naturally he gave Super Saiyan Blue its own voice. This can be a good or a bad thing depending on your preference. I personally appreciate the effort as I feel it helps add a more serious feeling to a show many would describe as sorely needing a more serious tone. The line in question people are bothered by is Schimmel's description of the Kaioken mixed with Super Saiyan Blue.
Super Saiyan Blue is all about power through extreme control. Combining that with the calming focus of the Kaioken, and now there's no telling how high I can go!
As you've seen in my channel, I am not above scrutinizing this show for the mistakes that it's made in the past, but this to me sounds like people are looking for problems rather than noticing them. Both of these Schimmel quotes are left vague intentionally. Super Saiyan Blue is all about power through extreme control. I don't think anyone can dispute that. They even had an episode covering it. I think it's the thought of the Kaioken being associated with a calming focus people seem to have a problem with. However, while the move is associated with destroying your body, you'll find that every time Goku attempts any big move aside from the Super Saiyan transformation, calmness precedes it, specifically with the Kaioken. But back to the scene. Schimmel's interpretation of this scene is very different to Nozawa's, down to the dialogue and even the screams. And don't worry, we'll get to those. But first I want to ask, what is the Kaioken technique? Is it a move that shreds your body, pushing it past its limits 2, 3, and in this case 10 times over? It's a technique that when utilized puts tremendous stress and strain on the body. In short, it puts the user in extreme pain. Knowing this, I would like you to listen to these two cuts of the same scene, the first in Japanese and the second in English.
3倍、4倍、いや、
It's triple, quadruple. No, it's time! Kaioken does not!
In my opinion, in this instance, Sean Schemmel knocked it out of the park and elevated the scene higher than the Japanese version did. And this is my reasoning. As I've said, the Kaioken technique shreds the body, putting it under extreme stress and pain. Masako Nozawa's delivery, while fantastic and captivating, didn't convey pain. Sean, on the other hand, let out a battle cry I can only describe as throat shredding. Over the course of 10 seconds, he conveys pain, determination, and power. It is a battle cry of the highest order, and in my opinion, there is no comparison. It is easily, in my view, Schimmel's best scream as Goku. It's important to realize that the Japanese version is capable of making mistakes. Akira Toriyama isn't the only one driving the story anymore. There are teams of writers working on Super for Toei, so mistakes will happen. An example of one is Toei writing themselves into a corner during the Future Trunks arc, requiring a retcon of the Potara fusion. All I'm saying here is that if you have issues with the English dub for whatever reason, understand that there are just as many reasons to not like the Japanese version also, meaning the English can, will, and in my opinion should, make changes where they deem fitting. Speaking of changes that were made, let's talk specific voices briefly. First up on the chopping block is Frost. The existing Japanese voice actor for Frieza took on the role and changed little about his approach to the character Frost. The voice of Frieza in English is Chris Ayres. And while he doesn't tackle the role, his brother Greg Ayres does.
You accuse me of such terrible things, Vados. I'm so hurt.
This keeps the subtle connection to Frieza while allowing Frost to have his own identity. This is only a positive in my eyes. Vados and Champa I have mixed feelings on. I was never really a big fan of Champa's character in the Japanese to begin with, and his adaptation into English didn't help that either. Vados, on the other hand, I loved in Japanese, and while I love the sound of her English voice, I feel a lot of the attitude and sass, for lack of a better term, she showed Champa was lost in translation. Hit was a vital character to get right, and might I add, difficult too. It could very easily have been a situation that yielded a boring performance, but Matthew Mercer, as Hit, 100% works like a charm. The big one that people seem to be complaining about is Magetta's English voice actor. And to that I ask, why bother? The Japanese Magetta sounds terrible and annoying in the first place. If anything, the English is fitting. Are you sad that he isn't making the same made-up stupid sounds? Chapopopo! But on top of that, he only appears in a handful of episodes in the entire series. I have no idea why people even care. I've given a lot of praise to the English dub during this video. However, I will say in many ways every English dub has advantages and disadvantages going up against their Japanese counterparts. They have the luxury of time, thinking about their scenes months in advance, knowing full well where the series will be going, whereas the Japanese dub suffers in needing to get the episode out on time to air. So there really isn't time for a more complex, nuanced approach, and you can forget about running the risk of losing their voice. Masako Nozawa cannot afford to lose her voice during recording. The show must go on after all. However, one must also take into account that the Japanese dub solidifies itself in the minds of many fans by getting there first, which is arguably the most important thing. I can understand fans disliking certain English translations of their favorite shows. There can be bad casting or boring uninspired deliveries, but I am also of the opinion one should defend quality and effort when one sees it, and Dragon Ball Super's English dub is one of the best I've ever heard. If you think about it, what other production team has the budget, experience, and passion for a series to match Funimation's with Dragon Ball Super? I guess it all comes down to a combination of what you saw first growing up and how you like your Dragon Ball. Is Goku the goofy hick who only cares for fighting strong opponents? Or is he the lighthearted but strong do-gooder who wants to fight strong opponents to defend his loved ones? We are all faced with that subbed or dubbed decision at one point or another, so don't be so quick to judge others for their choices, as both have the potential to offer something the other does not. Thank you so much for watching. So, do you wish you waited for the English dub, or are you disappointed with how it turned out? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to rate this video and subscribe for more anime analysis. I'm trying to upload every week, so don't forget to click that bell icon too. See you guys!